Good afternoon, all. We are just waiting for a few more seconds. I see we are building up the amount of attendees. But let me already start with giving a bit of context to today's webinar. Today's webinar will be a client case, and we are very happy to have someone from Solvay with us today. Today, we will talk about leading indicator forecasting, and we will discuss how Solvay anticipates on sales turning points. And we had the privilege to collaborate with Solvay, with the project team at Solvay on this very topic. I'm Nick Verstraete. I'm CTO at Solventure, also partner for the past 12 years, but in a CTO role for the past 3 years. And today with me is Christian Backaert. Christian, welcome. We are very happy for you to be here.
With pleasure. Okay, so Christian Backaert, I'm working at Solvay. I'm in charge for, I will explain you that's more in depth later, but I'm in charge for the global planning of the group, aiming at increasing the maturity of the processes for the different businesses we have at Solvay.
Great. Well, before we dive into today's topics, we'll have a brief discussion about Solventure. If we can go to, yes, we are on the next slide, and a brief intro of Solventure. So Solventure is on a mission to kind of bring strategy, finance, and supply chain closer together. You might know Solventure from the thought leadership that our CEO has built up over the past years, which is about strategy-driven supply chain, where we really try to bring financial KPIs, operational KPIs together with an understanding of the strategy and bring it to the supply chain space. For the past 15 years, Solventure has always been focused on supply chain planning or supply chain management in a broad sense. And year over year, we have been able to grow with 15 to 20%, and we are end-to-end service, an end-to-end service in the sense that we help companies with translating their strategy to the field of supply chain planning, to the field of supply chain strategy, both through awareness creation, training, change management, implementation of processes, also a piece of software implementation. Today, we will discuss mainly one of the products, one of the processes we bring towards companies, and it is about leading indicator forecasting, which is a specific technique within the forecasting domain. Happy to discuss leading indicator forecasting, not only from a conceptual point of view, but also on how it has helped Solvay in tackling one of their forecasting challenges. And Christian is perfectly positioned to give some more context to that as heading the supply chain at the planning competence center at Solvay. And he will talk a bit about, I think, the forecast improvement program that Solvay has laid out, and how leading indicator forecasting was one of the components within that broader forecasting improvement program, so that we will cover today. Let's have a brief look at the agenda. So, as said, the Solvay forecast improvement program, we will start with that, say a bit more about what is the concept of leading indicator forecasting before we discuss an example. The example that we will discuss is the example of an automotive product line. So one of the product lines that Solvay has towards the automotive industry. We will discuss some results. Results will be twofold, will be both on a quantitative dimension, but also on a qualitative dimension. And then most importantly, I think the most beneficial part of today, and where we will also feel what is the experience from the Solvay team, is on the lessons learned. And of course, we will end with some Q&A at the end. Well, Christian, maybe you can give some context on Solvay. And sure. What is the context?
Thank you, Nick. So just to give you some context and what's the type of business we are in. So Solvay is a Belgian company. You see the level of sales. We are approaching 10 billion of euro. This year will be above that figure. So we are a company of 21,000 employees. We are present in 63 countries, which represents more or less 50% of all the countries that exist on Earth. And we have 98 industrial sites that are positioned in all the region of the world, with approximately 30% in the US, 30% in Europe, and 30% in Asia. So on the next slide, you see also the type of markets that we are covering, with three main markets. First one is automotive and aerospace. Second one is customer goods, or HPC as we call it, home and personal healthcare. And then we have the industrial applications. And for all the products that we have, we rank top 3 in those markets. But what you have to understand, and that's important for the explanation of the leading indicators today, is when we say that 24% of the sales that we realize are in the automotive and aerospace market, we have a large range of products. So we have in total approximately 50,000 different SKUs in the group. And for automotive, we are producing, for instance, some parts of the different cars that you can see, which are light-weighted composite materials to replace steel-based materials. But we are also producing silicate that will be one major component of the wheel. So you see a large range of product for the different markets, and that's very important to mention when we will go through the details of the leading indicators. So in the next slide, you see where we are positioned as a transformation center. So the transformation center reports directly to the executive committee of Solvay, more precisely to the CTO, so the transformation officer. And in the transformation office, we have 4 main entities. One is planning, then we have logistics, we have a customer engagement model, and then we have a transformation office. I'm in charge for all the planning activity for the transformation office. And what does that mean, actually? It means improving the maturity in the different businesses, and that's something I didn't mention. You have seen the different markets that we have, but we have 10 different businesses also in the group, and so we are covering the scope of all the businesses of the group. Then we are supporting those 10 businesses. We call them GBUs for specific projects. Leading indicator is one of those projects. In our role, we are also fostering standardization to have similar tools, similar processes implemented everywhere. And we support digitization, leading indicator being one of the different applications that we try to put in place in the group. When I consider planning, actually we consider the 4 main elements of planning. So one is forecasting, then we have S&OP, inventory management, and all the cash all the cash discussions that we have and that you probably have also currently in your groups. And then what we call the S&OE, which is the execution, the scheduling part, that is more operational activity for the planning. So focusing now on forecasting, we launched in the group a specific program around forecasting. So The last years we faced a number of crises, and more and more it was obvious that having a correct view on how the markets are evolving is essential in supply chain. So we created a program to improve the forecasting process within the group, and you see there 5 main elements of that program. The first one is statistical forecasting. It's implementing the basic of the statistical forecast in the different businesses. We have performance management, and so you know that if you do not set a target, then you will not progress. That's part of performance management. We consider also segmenting the approach of forecasting, so you will not forecast all your SKUs the same way, and that's part of the segmentation. And then implementing the correct roles within the demand planning process is key to success. The fifth one is about the leading indicators, and that's what we will present you today. On the right side, you see the KPI that we are using, and I didn't put the results for Solvay, but just to explain you, we have several ways to calculate the forecast accuracy. The X percent represents, for me, the most important one, or the correct image of the accuracy, because it's calculating the accuracy at the level of material shipped to. And so how much do I consider I will sell of that material, that SKU, for that customers located in that place. Then you can have a calculation, and that's also what we do, using a weighted approach. And for us, a weight is, for instance, considering a region, and then you have the forecast accuracy at a more aggregated level, for instance, for a global business. I've put you the difference it gives in the value. So if you start at the aggregated level, and if you compare with the most detailed one, you have 40 points of forecast accuracy difference. When we are at the level of business, we will approach 90 something forecast accuracy. But when you dig into the details, of course, you will be much lower. I put you as a reference the benchmark, which is from Gartner, where the upper quartile reach 81%. We are not at that level.
Okay, great. Thanks for explaining that outline of the forecast improvement program. And it's clear that it has been very deliberately since 2018. In 2018, we collaborated on a pilot, a sort of proof of a prototype at that time, on one to apply the principle of first time. And we also had one of the webinars at that point. So, and that was a very deliberate to have leading indicators as part of that broader forecast improvement program. Now, but let us dive into what are we trying to do with the leading indicators? Well, with leading indicator forecasting, at the left-hand side, you see actually what is traditional forecasting. If you take traditional time series techniques, what is their approach is to take past behavior, the past trends that are in the historical data points, and to project them into the future. They only take information with them, which is within the time series itself. So typically where you see traditional forecasting techniques going out of range is when there are clear turning points or inflection points. On those moments of inflection points, you see that the past trend, the upward trend, for example, is being projected into the future and keeps on giving an upward projection. While in reality, you might be at a point where there is a down cycle, where there is a recession, for example, coming up, as we see now in many of the markets. Traditional forecasting techniques are not able to take that information inside, so we'll go out of bound or out of range there. With leading indicator forecasting, we apply a certain technique to identify what are the indicators which have a certain correlation with the time series at hand of that product line, and what is their leading value on the sales of the company at hand. That is the kind of the base principle on leading indicator forecasting, and that's a methodology that we developed the past years at Solventure, kind of both the forecasting methodology, but also the product to support it, a product that collects all these indicators and allows to test which are the indicators which are correlated with. On the methodology, because that's the concept, how do we bring it into a project together with the customer? Well, there are 4 main steps. The first step is to explore all of the indicators. At Solvay, we also started with publicly available information, publicly available indicators from global sources that we collect, but we also included some of the private data sets. For example, on the automotive sector, there are various analysts which provide expert data for those markets. Those indicators are being collected and being explored. Now, in the second step, we are going about matching it. So matching the indicators with the time series at hand, and that happens in twofold. One, it's about statistics. It's about finding that correlation, that causality with a leading value, because if there is no leading value, of course, there is no benefit to be gained, but also by involving the broader project team, by the expert input. And we will discuss later on how we explore the broader value chain to understand, okay, which are the indicators to really be evaluated and are candidates to be included in the forecasting model. For training the forecasting model, we use advanced regression techniques, more complex regression techniques than the ones that typically are broadly known. And then in the last step, we develop what-if scenarios, because we really want to have a forecast projection on a regular moment, which actually gives a possibility to discuss about early warning signals. Are we at a moment where there is a turning point coming up? That's where really the discussion and the early warning signals are aimed at. But maybe, Christian, you can share something about the collaboration and the outline of the project.
Yes, sure. So that's a project we started more than 1 year ago. So we initially was January, that's probably the official date. But it took us certainly 1 year to convince one of the business to start a proof of concept in the leading indicators. So the objective was really to move from a classical statistical approach where you look back, you look at your data and you try with the classical seasonality trend and so on to evaluate how your market is evolving. But we wanted to look or to take the forecast from another angle and really test indicators that are predictive for our market. That was the objective. Was difficult to start to find a business because they considered that, and at that time we were selling pretty well. We were reaching our targets in terms of contribution margin, cash, service level to the customer. So the question from the business was, why do we need to improve? And if you're working in the supply chain, you know that the pyramid of indicator, on the top of it, you have the forecast accuracy. So we started in January, then it took us approximately 3 months to create the model. That was the work of Solventure, to look at the different indicators, the correlation. So that was the technical part, I would say, of that project. Then you have to realize that you need time to convince the business that the leading indicator are working, and to go to the adoption. So if I take the automotive, we considered a lag of 3 months, means that the indicators, when there is a turning point, it happens 3 months before your own market is following the same or the opposite direction. So when you start in April, you say, okay, that's what we see, but you need then to wait 3 months before you can see the results. And that's something that we observed so after 3 months, the first results were in the direction of the leading indicators. Then you have the classical reaction saying that, oh, it's a coincidence. So you need to wait 1 more month, and etc. So it's taking time for the adoption, while from the technical or the design phase, Solventure managed to do that in a very short period. So what we did, and here we focus on the automotive sector, but we then started other markets in the course of the year 2021. And so that was the proof of concept. Finally took us almost 1 year for 3 main markets, even a 4th market that was not really delivering. And since then we continue, and we recently signed a new contract for the extension of this proof of concept.
Yeah, it's definitely a long-term game. It's sort of a marathon. It's also almost a change project. We said as well.
Also, yes, yes, indeed, and I will come back on that. So it's important that you consider your process next to purely the results of this technique.
Yeah. So let's dive into the example. We have selected one of the product lines that we explored together with Solvay that we worked on. We explored the indicators, trained the model, so we will discuss it. It's in the automotive context, and this is, of course, the starting point. You need to get a time series on the table. Here at Solvay, we had a certain luxury. Typically, we use 5 to 7 years of historical data. Here at Solvay, we had the ability to go back until 2010 for this product line. So again, this is at a somewhat aggregated level. It's not at the individual SKU level. This is at the product line. Okay, a product that is being sold into a certain market, here into the Americas. The black line is, of course, the observations, the individual observations. The red line is the underlying trend. And the underlying trend that takes out the seasonality, because we are in this technique not interested in forecasting the seasonality. We are interested in identifying the historical turning points and projecting, making a forecast or making projections about future turning points. The turning points are here indicated with what we call internally sometimes leading with donuts, and these donuts, those indicate the sales turning points. And what we see clearly here on the graph as well for this product line is that during the COVID period, there was quite a fallback in demand with the really physical lockdowns. And then the behavior after that COVID period became very different as before. And what we see here is that the volatility increased significantly. So that's definitely one of the things. Now, apart from analyzing the time series, what is done in the first 3 months of analysis project as well is understanding what is the end-to-end value chain. What is the position of Solvay towards the other stakeholders in the end-to-end value chain and the end market. For this product line, it's very different as for other product lines, for example, in the construction market, where we also collaborated on. There, the different actors are very different, and the position of Solvay is, of course, quite upstream, but the players in the middle are different type of players. To understand well what are the different actors in that end-to-end value chain and what is defining the end market is important for the project team in order to explore the right indicators and review potential indicators which demonstrate a leading value. So here, this is the automotive end-to-end value chain. Solvay delivers to molders. Molders deliver to tier ones, which deliver in consequence to vehicle manufacturers. And then in the end, you have the consumer with really the vehicle sales, which are taking place. So you see that the position of Solvay is very upstream in that end-to-end value chain. And Solvay has a clear visibility to the demand at the molders, but is also observing signals from the end consumer. But the complexity is, how does that relate to the sales, to the demand that Solvay experiences? That's where really the complexity is. One of the things we do as part of the project is identifying for the different echelons what are proxies for the activity on the different echelons. Here for this automotive value chain, we identified a number of leading indicators for each of the echelons. For example, vehicle sales for the far end, motor vehicle assemblies for the vehicle manufacturers, and the production of motor vehicle parts for the upstream echelon. Now, when we analyze the indicators on itself, not yet making a forecasting model, but really doing the analysis of the indicators, we see also here that before the COVID period, there was much more, how would you say, synchronization between the different activities at the different echelons. The automotive end-to-end value chains were really operated in a just-in-time way with not a lot of volatility in between. All of these echelons worked at the same pace. After COVID, there was a very different dynamic where we see that the production of auto parts and allied goods was at a very high level, but that the assembly of vehicles was very low, was much lower. And that you see then the discrepancy that a lot of parts were being produced, but not a lot of vehicles could be assembled. Of course, you know about the semiconductor challenges of having sufficient semiconductors in order to finalize or to do the assemblies of vehicles. That was really a struggle for that automotive value chain. And here on the slide, we also see the demand of vehicle sales just after COVID, in the first phase after the COVID period or the COVID recession. You see that the demand of vehicles really takes a high, but then falls back sharply. So that volatility is really also the volatility to what Solvay as upstream player in the value chain is exposed towards. You can also look at it from a different set of indicators. The blue line is here the production of motor vehicle parts, and the green line is the inventory of cars, which is here for the US, the domestic auto inventories in the US, which is at all-time low. So from one end, you see that within the supply chain, a lot of stock is being built up, but that stock is not getting to the end consumer. So that at a certain moment was a discussion, was also part of what is being monitored month after month, was about the bubble analysis. And this was kind of a bubble, kind of a lot of stock buildup within that end-to-end value chain, where it was becoming clear that companies were no longer working in a just-in-time mechanism, but were really getting back to building up significant amounts of stock within the end-to-end value chain. How do we bring the indicators? How do we connect them to the time series? Here you see the example of how we train a forecasting model with lasso regression. That's the technique we use, and that lasso regression will make us a forecasting model with as minimal indicators as possible, or a least amount of indicators or explanatory variables with the most predictive power. In this case, we trained the model with taking into account 2 indicators with a different leading value. From one hand, total vehicle sales with a leading value of 3, and domestic auto inventories with a leading value of 11. And both of them have a certain weight, a different weight as part of that forecasting model. So once the forecasting model is being trained and validated on historical performance, what is being done in that after that analysis phase is every month a forecast is being made together with the updated indicators, of course, based on the updated indicators. And we present the difference between what is called within Solvay the sales rep forecast and the leading indicator forecast. And then the real discussion happens at the right-hand side of the screen, where it's really about, okay, what are the growth percentages which are in the leading indicator forecasting, and what are growth percentages which are demonstrated in the sales rep forecast, and having the discussion around that. And having the discussion is really key. We will see that coming back at a later stage when we discuss the lessons learned, that it's really about facilitating the discussion on understanding, okay, why is there a difference between the 2 forecasts which start from different underlying assumptions. This is an example of what we also facilitate is the monitoring of different indicators. So every month, indicators which are in what is called indicator monitoring baskets are being updated and provided to the stakeholders of that specific product line to understand not only the indicators which are included in the forecasting model, but also the indicators which are closely related to that market, but maybe don't have the most explanatory value, but which help the stakeholders to understand what they see happening in the market, to better understand that and to quantify that. Let's discuss some of the results. One of the results is more qualitative in nature, and then the other result is quantitative in forecast accuracy. Here on the qualitative results, again, we see the historical time series, and the red is the underlying trend. Here is important to look towards the right-hand side, where you see the green line and the black line. Now, what is important, the green line represents the sales rep forecast, always for a lag 3. How good are we at forecasting 3 months ahead? So it's not the forecast that is made at one point in time. No, it's the combination of each time what was the projection 3 months ahead. And that's what is being indicated with the green curve. What is being indicated with the red curve is the forecast with taking into account the leading indicators. That's the red curve. The black curve here at the end is, we can use the pointer quickly. The black line here is the actuals, the actual business trend that was projected. And here you really visually see what is the potential of the leading indicator forecasting and how sales turning points can be identified. Is the red line follows the underlying actual trend which happened after the fact, really well, while the green line demonstrates that the expectations of the sales audience was that, okay, no, the upward trend will continue, and that was the expectation. So that's where companies can really gain 3 months, 3-4 months of time in order to adjust their decisions. So for me, that was really a great eye opener within the project.
Absolutely. And also, I would say that this was the moment where business started adopting the tool. because of course they consider that their forecast was the best forecast on Earth. And that was the green one. And when we disclosed the forecast from the leading indicators that was going in another direction, they said, hey, your system is wrong. And then you wait, and then you come to that period where finally the actual figures were aligned with the leading indicator, the life system of Solventure, and then the next month again, etc., etc. And that was really a shift in the discussion we had within the demand consensus process, because yes, that's where the business realized that the leading indicators may bring more accurate values than what they used to get.
Yeah. So, and that's also where you see it's much more than a quantitative thing, right? Doing this project within a company, it's also many other aspects.
Yes, definitely. And well, we will discuss that point in the lessons learned. But indeed, and so of course you have the factual elements, the technical discussion on the figures, but it's also bringing another perspective in the way you manage the forecast process.
Yeah. The second result is more quantitative in nature. Of course, it's about forecast accuracy, and here it's important for me. We repeat that quite often. It's not the goal of outperforming one forecast versus the other. It's rather to understand what is the inherent forecast accuracy of the different forecasts, and does this leading indicator forecasting have a potential to drive forecast accuracy improvement? Well, what we see here is for that Americas region, that the forecast accuracy over a period of 18 months, because it's, I think it's more or less 12 to 18 months that we have taken into account, that the forecast accuracy of leading indicator forecasting reached a level of 90% for this product line, for this region, while for the sales rep forecast at that moment, the accuracy over that period was 66%. So there is definitely a potential, if you drive the discussion between both, understanding the difference between both forecasts, to improve the forecast, the consensus forecast significantly. And you see there also indicated the bias. You see there a classic over forecasting bias within the sales rep audience and within the sales community, and a negative, a slightly but much smaller negative bias with leading indicator forecasting. Of course, this is being followed up month over month, and it's important to see, okay, how consistent is the accuracy of the different models over time. Now, let's discuss really how you experienced this project, Christian. Let's dive into the lessons learned.
Okay, so we may summarize the experience in 3 points, and then we'll go to more feedback or quotes from the participants of the forecast exercise. I think that thanks to the leading indicator, we could get to a more collaborative input from the different entities or stakeholders in the forecast, but also from the figures themselves. And so, you know, we can integrate some customer forecasts, we can integrate statistical forecasts, and here we have added one, which is the leading indicator. So leading indicator is not the only element that you need to consider in your approach. For instance, leading indicator is working at the market's level, while your customer may or the dynamic of your relationship with your customer is or may be different. So I take an example. If you reach maximum share of your customer, even if the market or the leading indicator will indicate that your market will continue to grow, probably you will not increase your share within that customer. So you have to pay attention to the different dynamics of those elements. So including the external indicators is also important, and we have seen some graphs compared to having only the voice of your own sales rep. So it helps challenging the figures from your sales department, and of course you can segment the approach. And that's also what we have done with the leading indicators there. Well, we showed the results from the US market, but we have other results for Europe and in Asia. And the dynamic and the indicators we use for the other regions were different as well.
Yeah. Some of your quotes on the value of leading indicator forecasting. I'll let you take the lead.
So definitely it helped improve the forecast. You have seen the results, almost 25% on average for the American market. We have also to say that it doesn't work in all for all the markets. And so for some markets, we didn't see a real improvement. But there, you may also consider the reduction of the workload. If such an approach is delivering similar results than your sales rep forecast, maybe you can consider to automate the forecast from the leading indicators. That's one possibility. So, as I said, we managed to introduce the leading indicator, and one of the observation is that it helped us, it means supply chain, to challenge the values from sales. Probably you face the same issue in your organization, that when sales are coming with a forecast, supply chain says, well, it doesn't correspond to the past, so I would like to challenge it. But in terms of accountability, it's not supply chain that is accountable for the forecast values. While here, it's changing really the paradigm, and you're bringing analytics to the discussion. And once there is an adoption of the tool, then really sales team are coming with their forecast, and they accept the challenge from the analytics. So accepting the view of the analytics is also helping sales to reconsider, I said challenge, but they really reconsidered the future sales. And if you have a strong SNOP, you know that this will have also implications for the supply part, and that's very important, especially nowadays. If you look at the coming months, you read probably in the press that the majority of the industries are considering a slowdown next year. But the question is, when will that happen? And how long will that take? So considering those uncertainty, it's not statistical forecasting that can answer those questions. So that's why I really strongly recommend to have this leading indicator approach part of your set for the forecast process. And here you can see some quotes, majorities coming from business people, salespeople, that consider that it helps changing the discussion within the demand forecasting process, and that was really appreciated. It took time, but now it's part of the standards in the forecasting approach.
Yeah, and I still remember the moment where we did that more qualitative interview process, where we asked the key stakeholders what they took away from the monthly cycles and so the initial project, but also the monthly cycles about reviewing the indicators, reviewing a forecast with macroeconomic information inside. This was really a demonstration for me how the skepticism, which is typically in sales communities about the forecasting game, how that can evolve. And yeah, well,
yes, sure, no doubt. And now they would like, of course, to continue, so it's fully adopted. Yes, for me that was really a game changer in the relationship between supply chain and the business. Huge difference compared to the past.
And I think having worked with a lot of companies, that a lot of companies envy that aspect, and also face that same challenge of the convincing sales to be engaged in that forecasting process, to not see that as I need to enter my data in a system, but really have a added value discussion on the forecast. So, and one of the quotes that resonates with me quite well is like, it allows to not for salespeople to not build a story around the forecast that they made, but rather discuss about what is the difference between two forecasts with different assumptions, and which forecast has the biggest certainty or the biggest confidence inside. So
yes, indeed, and well, looking at the uncertainty we have nowadays, clearly leading indicator is helping. So maybe one other point, I mentioned that, so the leading indicators is working at an aggregated level, at the level of the market. So you still need to build your process to translate what you see from the leading indicators into your combination of products and customers. I think also one observation is that, and you showed that in the approach, Solvay is not selling directly to the car manufacturers, but to intermediates. When you discuss with those intermediates, if they have no leading indicators, then they will base probably their forecast to their statistical modeling, and that's introducing also a bias. And so that's something we are considering now, is to try to find the leading indicators of the leading indicators, and to be one step further. But that's probably for the future.
Yeah. Also triggers with me like sales. How do salespeople come to a forecast? One of the things they also do is they speak with customers. Of course, that's their role, right? To engage and speak with customers. Then they ask customers, what is their expectation of the market? But if you're so upstream in the market, it's unlikely that they have a better understanding of what is coming up. And you can also end up in a game where it's about having certainty of supply, definitely in situations also, where there is where there is struggles on the supply side.
Yes, and pricing is also playing a role in that game. So it's not easy, but definitely leading indicator for me is key, is one very important input in your forecasting approach.
Maybe a last quote that I've taken with me for a while to end, and then open up for questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, feel free to already post them in the questions pane. You can see it in the Zoom interface. But the quote that still resonates with me is the metaphor you made. Leading indicator forecasting is like an insurance. So maybe you can explain a bit to the audience how you see that, or.
Yes, well, it's an insurance in the sense that it's bringing more accuracy for the future. So an insurance is there only when you need it. And so it doesn't give you a certainty, but it gives you a kind of sieve, a filter that will challenge what you have in your books. And again, coming back to nowadays and predicting 2023, I think it helps you having that insurance that it will go in the direction globally, in the direction of those leading indicators.
Yeah, and that aligns well with the volatility that we also saw in the time series. It seems like the volatility in a lot of the product lines is much higher since the initial COVID outbreak.
Yes, and that will continue because now we have this energy crisis following or parallel to the Russian crisis. But what will be next? We don't know. There will be other crises. The world is changing, and that will continue. So you need to be prepared for that, and you need to organize your supply chain with additional digitization, additional analytics, and not continue to work as we used to do, which is a more reactive mode. If I take the case of, and there was one question about what's the lag that we consider in the forecast accuracy. Our standard KPI globally at the level of the group is 2 months. That's the lag that we take. But so it means we measure the forecast accuracy from the SNOP 2 months before the moment we have the actuals. But we also try to make a segmentation based on the length of the supply chain. If you have a global supply chain that takes 4 months, means that the moment you want to react, you will see the results only 4 months later, because you need to organize for the raw material and things like that, maybe movements between the region.
So for different supply chains,
and for different supply chain, we take different lags in the forecast accuracy. Yes.
Yeah. And also we used a lag tree as part of the automotive value chain to compare that. There we focused on a lag tree horizon. I see we also have a question about, so we talked extensively about automotive. What has been the result of other business segments that we analyzed with leading?
So we considered 4 major markets, and now we are trying to extend that to other markets. So 25 is the result for the automotive. For the others, we were in a range between 0 and 20%. So for each market, we also consider a combination with the region, because the dynamic is different. Asia is a very regulated market, and so you have to consider other conditions there. And as I said, for some of the markets, sometimes market region combination, the leading indicators were not delivering better results today, because well, for the future, I don't know, things are changing very fast. But even if for some of those markets there was no additional value, it facilitates the work of, or the workload of the salespeople. Plus, and coming back to the insurance, it will reinforce the message from the sales division. If the sales division says, well, it will grow 10%, and that the leading indicator says it will grow 10%, of course, it's not improving the accuracy, but it's confirming,
it's
in a sense,
giving additional arguments and evidence about
yes.
It's about confidence that you can place in the forecast.
Yes, so that's an important point. So that's the range that we have observed. Now, one additional point. We started the work. We were using a number of leading indicators that are publicly available. Now we are introducing also a number of indicators that we are buying. And of course, this may change the accuracy of those leading indicators, because the more you will use indicators that are correlated to your markets, the more the accuracy will be important. So it's a continuous work that you have to do.
Yeah, and then we also kind of made improvements to the model to kind of incrementally with the insights from one market, with including the private data sets. We also retrained and expanded the models, and typically every quarter we see that some retraining is helpful.
Yes, necessary, really.
One more question I have here on the screen is about how do you connect this to your S&OP process? Can you comment?
That's a good question. So there is no automated way to take those value into the system, because as I said, it's working at a market level, and in our system, in our S&OP tool, the APS, we are working at the level of SKU and ship to level. But from the S&OP standpoint, forecasting is the first part of it. So we take it completely in that process. So it's fully part of that process. It's an input that will be used to come to the demand consensus. Okay. So, and the validation of the forecast, which is the accountability of the business manager, is influenced by the leading indicator.
Yeah. And what are then the typical stakeholders for each of the product lines?
So we have, well, depending on the organization, we have the sales manager for the region, or the sales manager for a portion of the market. And then we have the business manager that is in charge for the global market worldwide. And these are, of course, supply chain is there, of course, finance is there around the table. But for me, the accountability is in the end of the business, and they have the last word. Means that if the leading indicator, as you could see on the graph, the red line is showing that the market is declining, but that the business manager says, no, it will increase, that's okay for me. Yeah. And so we challenged, we showed the results, but that's his responsibility. It's not the supply chain responsibility. So, and that's
supply chain is there to facilitate.
To facilitate, to organize the planning according to the final decision. And our role is to challenge by introducing leading indicators.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot for sharing this. I think these are very important, very insightful lessons learned. I'm very happy that we could share this today with the audience. And thanks for coming to our office. And we look forward to the next phase of this collaboration together with Solvay.
With pleasure.
Thank you.